Lady Chatterley's lover. It was going to snow. All grey, all grey. The world looked worn out. The chair waited at the top of the pink path. Clifford looked round for Connie. "Not tired, are you?" he said. "Oh, no," she said. But she was. A strange, weary yearning, a dissatisfaction had started in her. Clifford did not notice. Those were not things he was aware of. But the stranger knew. To Connie, everything in her world and life seemed worn out, and her dissatisfaction was older than the hills. They came to the house and around to the back where there were no steps. Clifford managed to swing himself over onto the low-wheeled house chair. He was very strong and agile with his arms. Then Connie lifted the burden of his dead legs after him. The keeper, waiting at attention to be dismissed, watched everything narrowly, missing nothing. He went pale with a sort of fear when he saw Connie lifting the inert legs of the man in her arms into the other chair. Clifford pivoted round as he did so. He was frightened. "Thanks then for the help, Mellors," said Clifford casually, as he began to wheel down the passage to the servants' quarters. "Nothing else, sir?" came the neutral voice like one in a dream. "Nothing. Good morning." "Good morning, sir." "Good morning. It was kind of you to push the chair up the hill. I hope it wasn't heavy for you," said Connie, looking back at the keeper outside the door. His eyes came to hers in an instant as if wakened up. He was aware of her. "Oh no, not heavy," he said quickly. Then his voice dropped again into the broad sound of the vernacular. "Good morning, to your ladyship." "Who is your gamekeeper?" Connie asked at lunch. "Mellors, you saw him," said Clifford. "Yes, but where did he come from?" "Nowhere. He was a Trevershaw boy, son of a collier, I believe." "And was he a collier himself?" "Blacksmith on the Pit Bank, I believe. Overhead smith, but he was keeper here for 2 years before the war, before he joined up. My father always had a good opinion of him, so when he came back and went to the pit for a blacksmith's job, I just took him back here as keeper. I was really very glad to get him. It's almost impossible to find a good man round here for a gamekeeper. And it needs a man who knows the people." "And isn't he married?" "He was. But his wife went off with various men, but finally with a collier at Stack's Gate, and I believe she's living there still." "So this man is alone?" "More or less. He has a mother in the village and a child, I believe." Clifford looked at Connie with his pale, slightly prominent blue eyes in which a certain vagueness was coming. He seemed alert in the foreground, but the background was like the Midlands atmosphere, haze, smoky mist. And the haze seemed to be creeping forward. So when he stared at Connie in this peculiar way, giving her his peculiar, precise information, she felt all the background of his mind filling up with mist, with nothingness. And it frightened her. It made her seem impersonal, almost to idiocy. And dimly, she realized one of the great laws of the human soul, that when the emotional soul receives a wounding shock which does not kill the body, the soul seems to recover as the body recovers. But this is only appearance. It is really only the mechanism of the reassumed habit. Slowly, Slowly, the wound to the soul begins to make itself felt like a bruise, which only slowly deepens its terrible ache till it fills all the psychic. And when we think we have recovered and forgotten, it is then the terrible after effects have to be encountered at their worst. So it was with Clifford. Once he was well, once he was back at Wraby and writing his stories and feeling sure of life, in spite of all, he seemed to forget and to have recovered all his equanimity. But now, as the years went by slowly, Connie felt the bruise of fear and horror coming up and spreading in him. For a time, it had been so deep as to be numb, as it were non-existent. Now, slowly, it began to assert itself in a spread of fear, almost paralysis. Mentally, he still was alert, but the paralysis, the bruise of the too great shock was gradually spreading in his affective self. And as it spread in him, Connie felt it spread in her. An inward dread and emptiness and indifference to everything gradually spread in her soul. When Clifford was roused, he could still talk brilliantly and, as it were, command the futures when, in the wood, he talked about having a child and giving an heir to Wraby. But the day after, all the brilliant words seemed like dead leaves, crumbling up and turning to powder, meaning really nothing, blown away on any gust of wind. They were not the leafy words of an effective life, young with energy and belonging to the tree. They were the host of fallen leaves of a life that is ineffectual. So it seemed to her everywhere. The colliers at Tevershaw were talking again of a strike. And it seemed to Connie there again it was not a manifestation of energy. It was the bruise of the war that had been in abeyance slowly rising to the surface and creating the great ache of unrest and stupor of discontent. The bruise was deep, 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 the bruise of the false inhuman war. It would take many years for the living blood of the generations to dissolve the vast black clot of bruised blood, deep inside their souls and bodies. And it would need a new hope. Poor Connie. As the years drew on, it was the fear of nothingness in her life that affected her. Clifford's mental life and hers gradually began to feel like nothingness. Their marriage, their integrated life based on a habit of intimacy that he talked about, there were days when it all became utterly blank and nothing. It was words, just so many words. The only reality was nothingness, and over it a hypocrisy of words. There was Clifford's success, the bitch goddess. It was true, he was almost famous, and his books brought him in £1,000. His photograph appeared everywhere. There was a bust of him in one of the galleries and a portrait of him in 2 galleries. He seemed the most modern of modern voices, with his uncanny, lame instinct for publicity. He had become in 4 or 5 years one of the best known of the young intellectuals. Where the intellect came in, Connie did not quite see. Clifford was really clever at that slightly humorous analysis of people and motives which leaves everything in bits at the end. but it was rather like puppies tearing the sofa cushions to bits, except that it was not young and playful, but curiously old and rather obstinately conceited. It was weird, and it was nothing. This was a feeling that echoed and re-echoed at the bottom of Connie's soul. It was all flag. A wonderful display of nothingness. At the same time, a display. A display. A display. A display. Michaelis had seized upon Clifford as the central figure for a play. Already, he had sketched in the plot and written the first act. For Michaelis was even better than Clifford at making a display of nothingness. It was the last bit of passion left in these men, the passion of making a display. Sexually, they were passionless, even dead. And now it was not money that Michaelis was after. Clifford had never been primarily out for money, though he made it where he could. For money is the seal and stamp of success. And success was what they wanted. They wanted both of them to make a real display, a man's own very display of himself that should capture for a time the vast populace. It was strange, the prostitution to the bitch goddess, to Connie. Since she was really outside of it, and since she had grown numb to the thrill of it, it was again nothingness. Even the prostitution to the bitch goddess was nothingness, though the men prostituted themselves innumerable times. Nothingness, even that. Michaelis wrote to Clifford about the play. Of course she knew about it long ago, and Clifford was again thrilled. He was going to be displayed again this time. Somebody was going to display him, and to advantage. He invited Michaelis down to Wraby with Act 1. Michaelis came in summer in a pale-coloured suit and white suede gloves and more orchids for Connie. Very lovely. And Act 1 was a great success. Even Connie was thrilled to what bit of marrow she had left. And Michaelis, thrilled by his power to thrill, was really wonderful and quite beautiful in Connie's eyes. She saw in him that ancient motionlessness of a race that can't be disillusioned anymore, an extreme, perhaps of impurity that is pure. On the far side of his supreme prostitution to the bitch goddess, he seemed pure. Pure as an African ivory mask that dreams impurity into purity in its ivory curves and planes. His moment of sheer thrill with the two Chatterleys, when he simply carried Connie and Clifford away, was one of the supreme moments of Michaelis' life. He had succeeded. He had carried them away. Even Clifford was temporarily in love with him, if that is the way one can put it. So next morning, Mick was more uneasy than ever, restless, devoured, with his hands restless in his trousers pockets. Connie had not visited him in the night, and he had not known where to find her. Crockery at his moment of triumph. He went up to her sitting room in the morning. She knew he would come. And his restlessness was evident. He asked her about his play. Did she think it good? He had to hear it praised. That affected him with the last thin thrill of passion beyond any sexual orgasm. And she praised it rapturously. Yet all the while, at the bottom of her soul, she knew it was nothing. Nothing. You must join me. Join me for the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Listen to the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. For now, Morel Bernard saying bye-bye for now. See you soon in the next video. Bye-bye.